Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a lone craftsman builds his dream garage on private land, he expects sparks from welding, not war. But when a power-hungry HOA president tries to erase his existence with fake laws, forged documents, and drones, one man decides to fight back, with steel, cameras, and the law on his side. I was halfway through welding a hinge bracket when I saw the mail truck slow roll past my gate, pause, and then reverse with the kind of hesitation that usually signals junk mail or a ticket. But this time, the guy actually got out. I wiped the sweat off my brow with the back of my glove and walked up the gravel path toward him, boots crunching in the dust. "Registered letter," he said, holding out the envelope like it was laced with anthrax. "Signature required." I signed, nodded, and tore it open with my fingers before I even made it back to the garage. The paper was thick, legal grade. There was a faint scent of perfume, or maybe smugness. My eyes scanned the heading, Law Offices of Sheffield, Drake & Moore. Below that, Notice of Architectural Non-Compliance, Immediate Action Required. It took a second for the words to compute. I blinked and kept reading. Something about my non-standard structural design, my industrial-scale garage, and, get this, how my workshop disrupts the visual integrity of the Eagle Hollow Estates community. Then came the threat. The garage must be fully removed within 21 calendar days of this notice. Failure to comply will result in fines of $250 per day and legal proceedings filed by the HOA. I actually laughed. Out loud. I stood there in my dusty jeans and welding apron, a guy who bought this property with his own money 9 years ago, holding a letter from a homeowners association I didn't belong to, telling me to tear down the garage I built with my own hands. I wasn't even mad yet. That would come later. At first, I thought it was a clerical error. Maybe someone typed the wrong address. So I went back inside and pulled up the GIS parcel map on the Sonoma County website. Took about 2 minutes to confirm what I already knew. My lot was 1.8 acres of unincorporated private land, sitting pretty across the road from Eagle Hollow's manicured maze of fake stone facades and solar-powered fountains. I had no covenants, no restrictions, no community bylaws. Just my deed, my land, and my giant steel-boned garage. But curiosity got the better of me. I Googled the name at the bottom of the letter, Karen Sheffield, President, Eagle Hollow Estates HOA. Of course her name was Karen, former professor of architecture, published in some obscure journal about residential visual rhythm. Moved into Eagle Hollow less than a year ago. Apparently retired early, which I now understood to be code for full-time neighborhood tyrant. Still, I wanted to handle it cleanly. I called up Russell Marks, the real estate attorney who handled my land purchase. He still owed me a favor after that septic tank fiasco on a cabin deal last year. I scanned the letter, sent him the GIS boundaries, and within a couple of hours, we had a response drafted, simple, polite, and legally bulletproof. To whom it may concern, Mr. Garrett Collins is not and has never been a member of the Eagle Hollow Estates Homeowners Association. His property lies outside HOA jurisdiction. Any further attempts to assert authority over this parcel will be construed as harassment and a violation of California private property statutes. Kindly cease and desist immediately. We sent it both digitally and certified mail. I even printed a hard copy and tacked it to my bulletin board next to a rusted-out carburetor and a poster of a '67 fastback Mustang. For the next few days, I went back to work. I had 2 custom door orders to finish. One for a guy in Arizona who wanted a flame-treated redwood facade, and another for a collector in Utah who was turning his barn into a private showroom. I figured that was the end of it. The HOA had made a mistake. I'd corrected it, and Karen would move on to policing solar panel angles or berating someone over their mailbox shape. But then, on the following Thursday, just after noon, a white Mercedes SUV slowed down outside my property. I watched through the blinds as it idled, then drove off. 30 minutes later, another car, this one a dark blue Prius, did the same. By the time the third car circled the block, paused, and drove off again, I wasn't laughing anymore. Something told me the HOA hadn't taken my letter as a friendly correction. Something told me Karen wasn't done. The next morning, I was tightening a bracket on a steel beam when I heard gravel crunching outside the garage. Not the random scatter of a neighbor's car passing by. This was sharper, closer, purposeful. I stepped out into the sun, welding mask still propped on my forehead, and froze. 2 men in neon orange vests and hard hats were standing right next to my garage wall, one of them squatting with a tape measure, the other marking something on a clipboard. I didn't recognize them. Definitely not from the county. One of them had a logo on his back that read, EHS Property Services. Never heard of it. "Excuse me," I called out, walking toward them. "Can I help you with something?" The guy with the clipboard looked up like I was the one interrupting his day. "We're just surveying for a structure removal," he said, all nonchalant like this was a routine errand. I blinked. "A what now?" He nodded toward the garage. "This building is flagged for non-compliance. We're conducting pre-removal measurements per HOA directive." I had to take a full second to process the stupidity of that sentence. Then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was throwing a wrench. "This isn't HOA land," I said slowly, as if he were hard of hearing. "This is private property, my property. You're trespassing." The other guy, still crouched with the tape measure, muttered, "We were told you'd be difficult." That snapped something in me. I pulled out my phone and started filming. "You've got exactly 10 seconds to get the hell off my land before I call the sheriff. I don't care who told you what. You're trespassing, and you're going to explain this to law enforcement." Clipboard guy shifted, clearly uncomfortable now. "We were contracted by the HOA president. She said she had approval from the county." "Name of the contractor?" I asked. He hesitated. "EHS. Eagle Hollow Standards." I almost choked. That wasn't a real company. That was HOA cosplay. The squatting guy stood up, muttered something about this being above his pay grade, and the two of them began retreating toward the road. Just before they crossed the gravel, one of them turned and tossed a folded piece of paper at my feet. "Official order," he said. "You're on notice." They drove off before I could reply. I picked it up and unfolded it. A single-page document with the header Sonoma Municipal Compliance Board, a completely fabricated agency name that doesn't exist. Below it, a signature that looked like it was traced from a high school diploma. The seal was a blurry circle with an eagle and a hill. I guess that was supposed to make it official. I scanned it and sent it to Russell, my attorney, with the subject line, "You are gonna love this one." 5 minutes later, he replied, "Forgery, zero question. This isn't even a legal format. They're playing with fire." I was still trying to cool down when I went inside to get water. That's when I noticed it. An HOA newsletter had been stuffed into my mailbox. I pulled it out and read the headline, "Community Preservation in Action, Eagle Hollow to Remove Visual Nuisances." The opening paragraph made my jaw clench. "Our HOA is committed to protecting the beauty and harmony of Eagle Hollow. Structures that fall within visible range of our community, even those on adjacent parcels, must adhere to a minimum aesthetic threshold. Enforcement actions have begun." There was no mention of me by name, but there didn't need to be. The next page had a photo taken from the street, a low-angle shot of my garage with a red circle around the upper corner. Below it, "Proposed removal target, Phase 1. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. Karen knew exactly what she was doing. She was using the illusion of authority to mobilize contractors and bully neighbors into thinking my land was her jurisdiction, and apparently she was willing to forge documents and send people onto my property to do it. I called the sheriff's department and reported the trespass, handing over the footage, the fake notice, and the name of the contractor. They took it seriously. The deputy on the phone said someone would come out to file a statement and asked if I'd mind turning over the footage. I said I'd burn them a copy. Just before I hung up, he added, "You might want to keep an eye on things for a while. If this HOA is forging documents, that could get criminal real fast." "No kidding," I muttered. That night, I went through my security cam footage and installed motion detection alerts tied to my phone. I also pulled out an old metal sign I'd stashed in the shed, one I'd made as a joke during a past project. With a few quick welds, I had it mounted at the edge of my driveway by morning. White letters on raw steel. "Private property, not subject to HOA. Trespassers will be recorded, reported, and embarrassed." I wasn't laughing anymore. It was a Sunday morning when I noticed the drone. I was in the middle of sanding down a steel door frame for a guy in Arizona when a low buzzing interrupted the sound of my belt sander. At first I thought it was a mosquito, a big one, but the pitch was off. Too steady, too mechanical. I stepped outside, squinting into the bright sky, and there it was. A small black quadcopter hovering no more than 15 feet above my garage, just sitting there, watching. My first instinct was to grab a wrench and hurl it. My second instinct was to grab my phone and start recording, and that's exactly what I did. I stood beneath the damn thing, holding my camera up, watching as it hovered for another 20 seconds before rising slightly, tilting, and floating off in the direction of Eagle Hollow Estates like a smug little spy. Now, I don't mind drones. Hell, I've flown a few myself. They're great for roof inspections. But this thing wasn't flying recreationally. It was positioned deliberately, scanning the top and side of my garage like it was a military target. And it hadn't been the first time either. I started reviewing my exterior footage from the past week and noticed something chilling. The same drone had shown up 4 times, always at roughly the same time, between 8:30 and 9 a.m. It hovered, filmed, then retreated, like clockwork. By noon, I had a folder with screenshots, timestamps, and video files all labeled and dated. I uploaded everything to the cloud and backed it up on 2 separate drives. Then I called my cousin Danny, a cybersecurity guy with a hobby in amateur drone forensics. "You get a plate," he joked. Funny? No, but I got the trajectory. I said, "Can you do anything with it?" "If it's commercial grade and transmitting metadata, yeah, send me everything." By mid-afternoon, Danny had tracked the serial hash of the drone back to a DJI account registered to someone named Elliot Sheffield. Sound familiar? Family member? Danny asked. "Wouldn't surprise me," I muttered. But that wasn't even the worst part of the day. That evening, while reviewing the site of the HOA's members-only portal, which, by the way, someone had miraculously left indexed by Google, I stumbled into a page labeled Visual Standards Enforcement Phase 1. It required a login, sure, but the page preview had cached content visible in the search result, and I saw my garage, clear as day. There was a cropped photo taken through the workshop window where I had left the bay door half open during a hot afternoon. Inside, you could see one of my custom car builds on a hoist, a welder parked beside it, and one of my design sketches pinned to the wall. I clicked through to the cached version. What followed made my skin crawl. Objectionable structures have been identified within the visual domain of Eagle Hollow Estates. Regardless of property lines, any structure that disturbs the architectural cohesion of our community is subject to resident vote under Article 5.1. Phase 1 Target, Industrial Garage, visible from West Perimeter, Proposed Actions. Community pressure via complaint submissions, visual nuisance reporting to county offices, drone inspection, ongoing. Board vote scheduled, Monday, 7 p.m., legal escalation pending. Attached media, see images below. And there it was, a full resolution photo of my garage interior, a shot that could only have been taken by that damn drone. I felt my hands clench around the mouse. These people weren't just annoyed by my garage, they were organizing a campaign. They were spying on me. And worst of all, they thought they could legally vote away my rights as a private landowner. At that moment, I knew this had gone from annoying to dangerous. I printed out everything, every cached page, every drone snapshot, every blurry map. I filed a police report first thing Monday morning for invasion of privacy, illegal surveillance, and stalking, attaching every bit of evidence I had. But I didn't stop there. I also contacted the FAA and submitted a complaint about unlicensed drone operations over private property. In California, drone flight that involves surveillance inside a home or enclosed structure without consent isn't just a nuisance, it's a violation of Cal. Civil Code, paragraph 1708.8. And just to be sure, I reached out to a licensing consultant I knew from a previous custom job and asked them to look into the name EHS Property Services, the contractors who had tried to mark my garage for demolition. A day later, she called back laughing. EHS is a sole proprietorship registered to a P.O. box in Rohnert Park. No contractor license, no insurance. Owner listed as Elliot Sheffield. There it was again. That name. Karen's husband, son, nephew. Doesn't matter. Same tree, same rotten fruit. I updated Russell, my attorney, and gave him everything. He just sighed and said, "All right, time to move from defense to offense." That night, I sat in my office with a cup of burnt coffee and every light on. My property wasn't just a target anymore. It was a symbol. And these people were trying to erase it, like they own the air around it. But the thing about working with steel for a living is, you learn to make things that last. And I wasn't about to let some HOA lunatics vote my garage out of existence. It took 3 days for the next volley to arrive, and this time it didn't buzz over my garage or come tucked into a suspicious envelope. It came from the county itself. I was pouring a fresh concrete footing behind the garage for a new metal awning I was planning when I saw the envelope pinned to my front gate with bright yellow tape. Official seal, Sonoma County Department of Planning and Development. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside was a notice of zoning compliance review, citing a complaint that alleged I was operating an unpermitted commercial facility on a residential lot, specifically a vehicle modification and fabrication shop with industrial equipment. The notice further stated that due to the volume of complaints received from neighboring residents, a formal administrative inspection had been scheduled for the following week. It even listed a case number. I stood there, gripping the paper, the warm wind catching its corners like it was trying to pull it from my hands. My jaw was tight enough to pop. They did it. Karen had escalated this to the county level. The real kicker: the inspection wasn't for anything real. I don't run a business out of my garage. Every build is personal or for close friends, and none of it violates any code. I'm not a damn dealership, but that doesn't matter to bureaucracy. One phone call from a determined idiot can still drag your life into red tape hell. I called Russell and forwarded the letter. By the time he called me back that afternoon, he sounded even more pissed off than I was. "They're leveraging the appearance of legitimacy," he said. "Flood the county with enough complaints, and someone's eventually going to respond. But here's the thing, Garrett, this isn't just harassment. It's calculated abuse of administrative process." That was lawyer speak for, "We're going to war." I decided it was time to stop reacting and start digging. That night, I submitted a Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) request to the county for every complaint, inspection request, or violation notice filed by the Eagle Hollow Estates HOA or any of its board members over the past 24 months. It took 2 days to get the first batch. What I got was gold. The HOA had submitted 37 complaints against 12 different properties, and only 4 of those properties were actually within their own boundaries. The rest were on adjacent private parcels just like mine. Some of the targets had already moved out. Others had filed lawsuits. One guy down the road, a retired welder who built a steel frame gazebo with his grandkids, had his entire structure torn down last year by a private contractor hired by the HOA, supposedly for violating historical view line standards. The contractor, EHS Property Services, same P.O. box, same name. I called the man. His name was Leonard, and we talked for nearly an hour. He'd given up the fight, didn't have the money, the energy, or the will to take on a swarm of legal termites, as he put it. That call lit a fuse in me I didn't even know I had. I forwarded all this to Russell, who passed it along to Michael Clark, a constitutional attorney and longtime friend of ours. Mike's the kind of guy who can quote the Fourth Amendment faster than I can find my welding mask. The next morning, I met both of them at Mike's office in Santa Rosa. We laid out every photo, document, letter, complaint, and drone image across a massive table like it was a war map. "We have everything we need," Mike said. "Forgery, surveillance, unlicensed contracting, document falsification, abuse of administrative channels, and now organized defamation." He pulled out a legal pad and started a list under the heading, County Superior Court, Civil Action Preparation. Here's what we filed: a formal civil claim against Eagle Hollow Estates HOA for harassment, defamation, and abuse of process. A criminal complaint against EHS Property Services for contracting without a license, trespassing, and fraud. A motion for injunctive relief to prohibit any further contact, surveillance, or encroachment by HOA officials. A separate request to the District Attorney's Office to investigate Karen Sheffield personally for forgery of public documents. We weren't bluffing anymore. Mike had one more idea, a good one. Let's go loud. He contacted a local NBC affiliate he'd worked with during a civil liberties case 5 years back. I agreed to do a sit-down interview, off camera at first, under the condition they don't air my name or location until the legal wheels started turning. But when the producer saw the drone footage, the fake demolition order, and the photos from inside my workshop posted on a neighborhood forum, she scheduled the segment for Monday night. It would air under the headline, HOA Tyranny, Sonoma Man Claims He's Target of Illegal Surveillance, Forged Orders. Meanwhile, I installed 4 more cameras, one on each corner of the property, motion-activated floodlights, a live monitor in my bedroom, and a second backup system with cloud redundancy. Karen wanted to make me feel small, boxed in, outnumbered. What she didn't count on was that I'm the guy who builds boxes out of steel and knows how to reinforce every goddamn side. The night the story aired, I didn't sleep. Not out of fear, out of anticipation. At exactly 7:30 p.m., the local NBC affiliate aired a 5-minute segment titled Private Property or Public Target: One Man's Fight Against Overreaching HOA. They blurred my address and voice, but they showed everything else. The fake demolition notice, the drone photos, the video of me confronting the survey crew. The segment ended with a chilling quote from their legal analyst. If even half of this is substantiated in court, the HOA and its officers could face severe civil and even criminal consequences. By morning, my inbox was full. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to reached out to offer support. A guy from 2 streets down, Steve, an ex-firefighter, emailed me. They threatened to fine me for my pickup being visible from the street. Glad someone's finally standing up. Then came the retaliation. Around 11 a.m., my power cut out. Not from PG&E. My whole panel had been tampered with. Someone had pried open the main service box and yanked the meter cable. I found the housing warped in scorch marks near the junction. I called the sheriff. The responding deputy was a tall, sunburned guy with tired eyes. He took one look at the busted meter and said, "You're lucky it didn't arc." He filed a vandalism report, but when I mentioned the HOA, he just sighed and said, "You wouldn't believe how many calls we get about them. But messing with your power, that's a felony." I handed him a USB stick with the last 24 hours of camera footage. The west corner cam caught a man in a reflective vest and baseball cap, clearly not a PG&E employee, sneaking along the fence line just before dawn. He carried a crowbar. The footage wasn't 4K, but it was enough to see him duck behind my service box at 5:41 a.m. and walk out 10 minutes later. The deputy took it seriously. An hour later, 2 plainclothes investigators showed up. They reviewed the footage, took photos of the damaged panel, and told me they'd cross-check it with local contractor licenses. But I already knew the name that would show up: EHS Property Services. That afternoon, my lawyer Russell filed for a temporary restraining order against both the HOA and EHS. We included the vandalism footage, the drone images, and the forged document analysis. The judge granted it that day. No contact, no trespass, no surveillance, no contractors, no letters. Violating it would lead to immediate arrest. We served the TRO via process server. Apparently, Karen answered the door herself. According to the server's affidavit, she laughed and said, "He thinks this will stop the board." That sentence would come back to haunt her because Russell and Mike weren't done. They filed a motion for expedited discovery, including subpoenas for HOA communications, vendor contracts, internal votes, and surveillance records. The court approved it, and suddenly we had access to their entire back end: emails, group chats, financial logs. What we found was staggering. Karen had created a private Slack channel titled Community Vision Correction. It included her, 2 board members, and a hired PR consultant. They openly discussed how to encourage visual compliance by targeting neighboring properties not under their jurisdiction. Screenshots showed them sharing drone photos, debating whose yard was too blue, and calling my garage a wart on the neighborhood aesthetic. There was even a budget line item: $12,600 External Landscape Harmonization Initiative, and under that, a payment to EHS Property Services labeled Corrective Consultation, Lot Drawer 601B, G. Collins. Lot 601B wasn't even part of the HOA. That was my parcel. We also found a spreadsheet with a target list: names, addresses, photos, color codes, suggested actions. I was at the top. Russell took one look at the file and muttered, "Jesus, it's a damn blacklist." Mike prepped the amended complaint. Now we were including civil conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and malicious prosecution. He also contacted the district attorney's office again, this time with physical evidence of coordination and funding for illegal activity. The DA responded faster than I expected. By Friday, subpoenas were issued. Karen was formally notified that she was under investigation for forgery of official documents, unauthorized surveillance, criminal conspiracy, contracting without a license via EHS, tampering with utility infrastructure, attempted coercion through fraudulent administrative filings. But even as the walls closed in, she made one more move. The very next morning, I walked outside and found a county vehicle idling by the gate. A woman in a gray jacket was taking photos of my garage with a tablet. I approached and asked what department she was with. She hesitated. I asked again. She said she was with External Code Liaison Services and handed me a card. It was fake. No county seal, just a generic clip art logo and a Gmail address. I laughed out loud. "You're trespassing," I said. "Smile for the camera." She turned and bolted back into the car. This wasn't just HOA politics anymore. This was targeted psychological warfare. But I wasn't scared. I was armed with a restraining order, a legal team, half the neighborhood on my side, and now a DA investigation. Karen had taken the game too far, and the fallout was just beginning. The next 48 hours felt like a slow detonation. Word spread fast. The news segment triggered a ripple effect I hadn't fully anticipated. Local papers picked it up first. Then a regional blog that tracked HOA abuses across California ran a full expose, quoting Karen's Community Vision Correction memo verbatim. By Monday, I had reporters leaving voicemails and emailing for comment. But that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was the DA's office officially launching a criminal investigation, and within days, the first warrants were executed. Early Wednesday morning, unmarked vehicles pulled into the HOA management building across from Eagle Hollow Estates. I watched from my driveway, sipping coffee as county investigators carried out boxes of binders, hard drives, and laptops. A drone of my own circled above, capturing it all from 300 feet. I didn't plan to post it, not yet, but I wanted a record, just in case. Karen didn't take it well. That afternoon, a Facebook post surfaced in the Eagle Hollow Estates residents group. A panicked wall of text from Karen herself, filled with all-caps rants about attacks on neighborhood integrity, personal vendettas, and abuse of public systems. She accused me of orchestrating a smear campaign, of manipulating the media, of weaponizing my engineering background to build an industrial monstrosity deliberately hostile to our aesthetic values. But the comments didn't go how she hoped. One resident posted, "I supported the HOA until they started messing with private land. My cousin built that garage. It's beautiful. Leave him alone." Another replied, "Is it true HOA funds were used to pay for drones? That's insane. I didn't vote for this." Within hours, the entire thread vanished, but not before screenshots flooded Twitter and landed in my inbox from 3 different people. Meanwhile, the DA's team uncovered something else, a bank transfer from the HOA's operating account to a shadow LLC titled Golden Horizon Developments just 3 months earlier. The sum, $42,000. The purpose, consulting and compliance remediation. We traced the LLC to a P.O. box in Bakersfield, but the real surprise came when we found the registered agent, Brian Scheffler, Karen's nephew. And guess who was listed as an advisor on their now-deleted website? EHS Property Services. So now it wasn't just illegal surveillance or overreach. It was fraudulent self-dealing. HOA money funneled into her own family's company under the guise of visual compliance. Russell updated our lawsuit again, now including embezzlement, RICO violations, and conflict of interest under California Civil Code, paragraph 5350. The judge granted an emergency hearing. It took place in a packed Sonoma County courtroom where our legal team presented the full arc. The drone footage, the fake demolition order, the rigged HOA votes, the fabricated municipal approval, the tampered utility box, and now the internal payments to her nephew's shell company. Karen's attorney, a corporate guy from San Rafael who clearly wasn't ready for this mess, tried to dismiss it all as a misunderstanding. The judge didn't buy it. By the end of the day, a temporary court injunction froze all HOA spending, suspended Karen from her role as president pending full investigation, and authorized county oversight over HOA activities. When she walked out of the courtroom, reporters swarmed her. She kept her head down, but one mic caught her muttering, "This isn't over." She was right. That night, I received an anonymous package. No return address, no note, just a flash drive. I scanned it for malware. Clean. When I opened the folder, I found video clips, surveillance footage from inside HOA meetings. Not public meetings, private board-only sessions filmed by someone sitting in the room, low angle behind a purse or jacket. Karen could be heard clearly. One clip had her saying, "We can't let him win. If we have to push this into code enforcement hell, we'll do it. We outvote him by existence." Another, "If it comes to court, we'll say it's about safety. It always plays better when you say it's about fire risk." The last one chilled me. Karen turned to the others and said, "If we squeeze him hard enough, he'll either tear it down or sell. Either way, we get the view back." I stared at the screen in silence. This wasn't about code, or community, or even power. It was about control. Control over a man who didn't fit the mold. A man who refused to kneel. I sent the clips to Russell and Mike. They responded in under a minute. Mike, "This just became a criminal conspiracy slam dunk." Russell, "The DA will salivate over this. Do not leak it yet. We use it in deposition." The next day, I gave my formal statement to county investigators. When they asked if I felt endangered, I didn't hesitate. Yes. They nodded. One said quietly, "You're not the only one." By the following week, Karen Sheffield was out on bail, but her world was shrinking fast. The footage I received, now authenticated and filed under seal, had detonated like a legal warhead. The DA's office had no choice but to widen the charges. We were no longer dealing with some rogue HOA nonsense. We were now in the territory of organized fraudulent conduct, and the investigators were circling not just Karen, but her entire inner board. Eagle Hollow Estates, once a pristine enclave of smug uniformity, was falling apart from the inside. I kept mostly quiet. My lawyer Russell warned me not to gloat, not to leak, not to provoke. But he also helped me prep for the depositions. We compiled everything: the drone captures, the altered HOA documents, the timeline of their fake municipal approvals, the screenshots of the visual harmony vote, and most importantly, the LLC money trail leading to Karen's nephew. But just when I thought the worst had been uncovered, another bombshell dropped. A whistleblower came forward. A woman named Teresa Hale, a former HOA secretary who'd resigned last spring, contacted my attorney. She had access to archived emails, meeting transcripts, and, most damning of all, a draft of an internal visual standards map that Karen had intended to present at the next HOA meeting. This map, Teresa said, included color-coded zones, not just within Eagle Hollow Estates, but beyond it, including my property, 2 others on adjacent private land, and even a public easement owned by the county. The plan? To petition the county for a scenic overlay district, giving the HOA veto power over construction outside their borders. It was essentially a stealth annexation under aesthetic pretenses. Worse yet, Teresa forwarded us an email Karen had written with the subject line, "Agenda, Phase 2 Acquisition Strategy." In the body, Karen had written, "If we can get code enforcement to red flag the garage as a commercial violation, we can build a case for forfeiture. Once the valuation drops, buyout becomes realistic." She wasn't just trying to tear down my garage. She was trying to devalue my home, sabotage its legal status, and pressure a forced sale. And she had tried it before, 2 years ago, with an elderly couple on the western edge of the HOA boundary. They'd ended up moving to Oregon, never knowing Karen had fabricated half the code complaints filed against them. This time, though, the pattern was exposed. Russell filed a motion to freeze all HOA voting and operations, citing the expanded evidence of systemic abuse. The judge approved it. HOA meetings were suspended, and county auditors entered the HOA's offices to begin a forensic review of their entire administrative history. Meanwhile, I kept getting strange visits. One night, a white SUV idled in front of my property at 2 a.m. No plates. Another evening, someone left a note in my mailbox. "Your next metal man." I installed 3 more cameras, one at the rear tree line, one above the garage door, and one pointed directly at the HOA gate. Mike, my friend the constitutional lawyer, put me in touch with a private investigator. They swept my property and found a small GPS tracker magnetically attached to the underside of my truck's rear bumper. It wasn't sophisticated, but it was deliberate. Karen's influence might have been collapsing in the legal arena, but someone in her orbit still thought they could intimidate me. I filed a police report and handed them the tracker. Mike added criminal stalking to our lawsuit, citing evidence of persistent, targeted surveillance. At this point, my case had ballooned into a hybrid of civil and criminal fronts. County officials were now investigating not just HOA overreach, but also contractor fraud, impersonation of municipal authority, illegal surveillance, and financial misconduct. Every HOA member received a notice in the mail that their dues would be frozen and potentially refunded, depending on the investigation's outcome. But then came the twist I didn't expect. The county clerk's office reached out. They had reviewed all development records tied to Eagle Hollow Estates and discovered that several of the permits Karen used to build common area structures, gazebos, a clubhouse addition, decorative retaining walls, had forged environmental clearance stamps. Some of these structures were built directly over protected stormwater drainage routes. Others were on improperly surveyed land, which meant the HOA itself might be illegal. Karen hadn't just overstepped her bounds onto my land. She had never stayed within hers. This wasn't just about a garage anymore. It was about an entire regime built on fraud, and now it was starting to fall apart piece by piece. The morning Karen Sheffield was sentenced, the courthouse steps were lined with reporters. I didn't stop for interviews. I had nothing left to prove. The charges stuck: falsifying municipal documents, unauthorized surveillance, fraud, conspiracy to interfere with private property, and misuse of public records. 13 years, no parole for at least 5. But what hit hardest wasn't the prison term. It was the permanent injunction. She could never again serve on a board, lead any registered organization, or file building-related petitions in the state of California. The HOA, meanwhile, was gutted. After the county completed its audit, they filed a civil enforcement action against Eagle Hollow Estates. Turns out, nearly half their infrastructure had been built without valid permits. Drainage violations, unauthorized electrical installations. Even the entry gate had been installed across a shared public access road illegally. The HOA's charter was suspended. County officials ordered a full reorganization under state supervision. As for my case, we settled quietly but decisively. HOA agreed to pay me a combined $490,000 in damages and legal fees. Their insurance almost didn't cover it. Their attorney tried to soften the blow by calling it a discretionary agreement, but I knew what it really was: surrender. I used part of the payout to upgrade my camera system, pay off the rest of my mortgage, and finally commission the side mural I'd been joking about for years. A local artist came out, shook my hand, and over the course of 3 days, painted 10-foot block letters across the galvanized steel. Not part of your HOA. Keep out. He outlined it in fire orange and painted a cracked gavel splitting in half right underneath. I added a custom metal sign at the end of my driveway. Private property. Not subject to HOA. Cameras recording every step. Funny thing, after that went up, I started getting compliments. Not from HOA folks, of course, but from the UPS guy, a few contractors, even a neighbor I hadn't spoken to since the whole mess began. One of them said, "You built the garage they all wish they could have." Maybe so. I didn't set out to make a point. I just wanted to live in peace, design my garage doors, and tune engines in silence. But when someone decides their taste overrides your rights, you either give in or you reinforce your foundation in concrete, with steel beams and cameras and maybe a little paint.